One very important practice on the path of self-inquiry, on the contemplative path, is the willingness to deeply investigate the nature of thought, the nature of our thinking. So many masters will tell us that we really don't know what thinking is. They'll ask the question, is there such a thing as thinking? Is there such an essence to thinking? What is the actual substance of thought? Where do thoughts come from? Is there a chooser of our thoughts? Can we actually find an entity inside or outside of our head that thinks our thoughts? So if we're willing to ask this question from a deep enough place to actually stay with our experience of thinking, we'll realize that that idea of a thinker, that idea that there's an entity in there controlling, choosing our thoughts, is just another thought in a series of thoughts. So it's really, we feel kind of helpless if we're honest with ourselves when we try to ask what thinking is, because all we have are thoughts to try to tell us what thoughts are, right? So one aspect of thinking that we can observe in our meditation, of course, we're taught to just kind of witness our thinking, watch the thoughts come, arise, and then watch them slowly dissolve and change into something else, to another thought, right? So you can say that we know, one way we know that we're not our thoughts are that there is a presence that's actually witnessing our thinking, that's actually aware of thinking. So what is that awareness that is watching our thinking? Now, that awareness actually has no objective qualities, because objective qualities are thoughts. Everything we think, see, hear, feel, they're all thoughts. There's an aspect of our experience of them that isn't thinking. We know it's not what we think about them. We know there's something about a sound that's not a thought. It's an actual sensation of the sound. We can only describe it. We can only describe our experience, whatever that experience is, through our thinking. It's the only way we know how to really describe our experience. So our actual experience of our thinking is that we don't know what it is. We don't know what the thinker is. But somehow we live our life thinking that we are our thoughts, that we are this separate self that chooses our thoughts and that possesses free will. So one way to approach this investigation would be to be still for a few moments and notice the successive thoughts that are rising and passing away. And if you've been practicing for a while, you can notice, as we're witnessing the thoughts, that there appears to be a gap between the thoughts. One thought will come up, like, now I'm listening and watching a video. I'm not sure how interesting it is or if it's good. That's thought number 2. I'm going to keep listening for a while. That's thought number 3. Maybe I'll go read a book after it's over. That's thought number 4. So in that series of thoughts, you can notice a gap between the first thought, the second thought, the third thought. And when we think that we imagine, when we think or we imagine that we are the chooser of those thoughts, we're imagining that in that gap between each successive thought, there's a chooser there, there's an entity there that actually chooses the next thought. But if we're willing to stay with our actual experience, where is that chooser in that gap between the thoughts? So when I ask myself that question, there's a thought that I found the chooser. So there's a chooser thought. I chose that next thought. But our actual experience of that gap between the thoughts is that chooser thought isn't there in the gap between thoughts. Does that make sense? You can't find the chooser in the gap between the thoughts. In the gap between the thoughts, there's just being. There's a gap where we experience not thinking. So the chooser thought doesn't actually choose anything. It just appears in retrospect as the next thought in line. So if you have those four thoughts, like maybe the fourth thought is, I'll go read a book after this video. The chooser thought that thinks you chose thought 1, 2, 3, and 4 only appears in retrospect as the next thought in the series of thoughts. So the actual chooser thought doesn't choose anything. It's just the expression of the thought of choosing. And actually, our separate self, the one who imagines that they're controlling thoughts, controlling our experience, is that chooser thought. It's only the thought of being a chooser, but it doesn't actually choose anything. Our actual experience of our thinking is that thoughts arise and pass away in succession. So one way I try to think about it is, the old analogy of the ocean and the waves. The never-ending flow of thoughts is like the flow of waves on the ocean, the ceaseless flow of the thinking. So the waves and the ocean are both made of water, right? Our awareness, our presence, the overwhelming actuality of our presence being here and now is like the ocean. And thoughts are made of that same consciousness, that same awareness itself. Just like waves and water, waves in the ocean are made of water. Thoughts and our actual awareness of our being are made of the same substance, awareness. Right? Actually, our awareness doesn't possess any objective qualities. It knows itself just by being itself. We ask that question, who am I? Again and again in our practice. And we realize that we can't know ourselves just through a thought, just through a sight or a sound or a feeling. We know ourselves just by being this awareness that we are, the awareness of being present here and now. There's only one here. If you imagine yourself going out into space, we can travel trillions and trillions of light years and still be surrounded by empty space. No matter how far we go, there'll still be endless, boundless space surrounding us in all directions. Are there any directions in endless space? But we can't find any particular point in space. Space is all pervading. So the here is here, and there's only one here. The now is always here. And it's always the same now. The now we woke up with in the morning and ate breakfast with, and then went and took our walk. Is there any difference between those different nows? They may seem longer or shorter depending on the activity, but the actual reality of being here and being present is always the same now. So we know, in some sense, that we don't choose the here. We don't choose the now. The now is given. We can't get away from here. We can't get away from now. And when we see that there is no real chooser, that the chooser, the thinker, is just another thought, that happens, that arises and passes away, it can be a difficult discussion to digest because we imagine that we're determined. We're part of some deterministic mechanical process. So where is our freedom? Right? Where's the freedom in that? That's something that we kind of rebel against and we feel uncomfortable with. And it makes sense. And I think that our rebellious feeling and our craving for freedom is a reflection, it is a deep intuition that deep down in our very being, we actually are boundless freedom itself. That our being itself, the universe itself, is the endless potential for an infinity of different activities, manifestations, and the joy of boundless freedom. So we can say that the separate self, the ideas we have about what we think we are, don't possess any free will. They don't possess any separate identity, so of course they don't possess any free will. But the witness of our experience, the witness of our thoughts, the knowledge of our own being, of our very being itself, the knowing of itself is not conditioned. Like space and time, here and now, are not conditioned. They can't be described, they can't be defined, they can't be confined. So they are the alive expression of joyful, boundless freedom. And of course, our thinking mind is one way we can become in touch with that, and that's a gift. So our thoughts are a gift from this infinite life source, ceaselessly giving us the opportunities to discover our joyous and boundless, our never-ending freedom.